Hello and welcome to the Career Success Podcast. I'm Jason Connolly. If you're a regular listener, it's great to have you back. But if you're new, welcome to the show. In this series every week, we speak to the biggest names in business all across the globe. We talk about their career stories, the lessons learned, how they've overcome challenges, and what success means to them. We offer practical advice to help you in your career. If you have a passion for business, then this is the podcast for you. In this episode, I'm joined by Stuart Kaye from London. Stuart left school at the tender age of 17 with no A-levels and modest GCSEs. Throughout secondary school, his entire world revolved around theatre stage lighting, where he was destined to study stage lighting design at college after school. However, a different path took him to a tiny law firm in the West End of London as a junior administrator. It was here that his boss took a shine to him and encouraged Stuart to study law, which he did, all self-taught from home, distance learning. The only time Stuart ever went to university was to sit the licensed conveyancer exams. Fast forward this quite a few years, and Stuart recently co-founded a boutique property law firm in the City of London, which just started 2 years ago with himself and his co-director. It's now employing 20 staff and has plans for national growth, and is doing incredibly well and really well known in the real estate market. Stuart, thanks so much for joining me on this episode.
A pleasure.
So, before we talk about the law firm and what you do in current day, you left school at 17, and in your introduction, we mentioned no A-levels, modest GCSEs. Kind of talk us through your early days and how it's all kind of got up to you being in law.
Well, I think it was pretty much being in the shadow of my family. They had all achieved rather well in their careers, and I think that there was a pressure on them, for me being the youngest, to follow in their footsteps. And I don't know, maybe I was just a bit lazy, maybe I didn't think I'd be able to do what they have done, and therefore my schooling wasn't terribly academic, put it that way.
And why was that? Was that because of the school, or was it the fact you wasn't
Yeah,
engaging? What made?
I don't wish to speak ill of the school. It wasn't fantastic, and I don't think they had terribly high aspirations for the students back then. I think now the school is rather good, but I think back then it didn't really churn out students destined for Oxbridge.
I had a very similar experience. I went to a school which I recently found out was in the bottom 5 secondary schools in the country. Thankfully, it's no longer here. So you went to this school. You wasn't necessarily getting kind of invigorated for academia, but you ended up in the law. But your passion at that time was kind of the theatre. Tell us a bit about
Yes.
that and how that kind of led you on this journey to legal.
I don't recall how it is I got into stage lighting at school, but I was pretty much running all of the design for all the productions that we put on. And then when I was about 15, 16, I was at the local amateur dramatics theatre. And then I worked at a couple of much bigger theatres operating the lighting. And it just became an absolute obsession. And that was what I was going to do. I mean, I lived, breathed, ate everything to do with theatre. And it still is a great interest to me now, but back then that was everything revolved around it. Probably that might, I guess, if one were to be in the psychiatrist's chair, that might say something about my personality. That when there's something I'm interested in, I go for it 1,000,000,000%. And that's what I probably did at school, to the exclusion of everything else. Nothing else really interested me except theatre. And I think as one has got older, then you tend to get a lot more interests and experience, and you can use that energy for some good, I guess. But back then, I was too young to realise that.
I worked when my first ever job when I left school at 16 years old was performing magic, and I was out there performing in theatres. I was out there performing in venues all over the country, and it gave me a really good grounding to be able to then get what my first employed job was at Virgin Atlantic. What do you think that kind of world that what you did in the theatre gave you necessarily to go in and get that job in the West End as a junior administrator? Because it must have gave you something to be able to secure a role in a sector that you had academia, you didn't have that, you didn't have what a lot of people normally do when they went into law. What was it, do you think, that got you into that law firm? Was it the theatre per se?
Okay, I mean that's a really good question. The truth is probably nothing to do with the theatre. I think it was all to do with my personality. That when I was applying to these colleges to study stage lighting design, why wouldn't I? And the syllabus came through, and I remember this like it was yesterday, and we're talking a long time ago, and I still remember this syllabus being incredibly technical. And still to this day, I can't wire a plug, but I'm very creative, and I just thought this is not going to work for me. And then my mother, who was a rather strong character, carted me off to the local careers service. There were these two rather strong women, my mother and the careers officer. They sat me down, and this rather stern careers officer said to my mother. I mean, I was sitting there. I wasn't involved in this conversation at all. They were completely mapping out my future. And this careers officer said to my mother, "So what can Stuart do?" And my mother said, "Oh, well, he's very interested in stage lighting, but he's not so keen on going to college." So the careers officer said, "Well, let's forget that. What else can we do with him?" So they had a look at all of these postcards full of all of these jobs. And the one thing that I have been fairly good at is being confident and being good with people. And they said, "Well, why don't we get him something client facing?" And there was this job going at this tiny little law firm, St Martin's Lane, and there was probably about 10 people in the entire firm. And it was to be receptionist, administrator, post clerk, everything. And I remember going for the interview and just getting on with everybody there. And during the interview, I think the interview must have lasted about an hour. And then towards the end of the interview, the interviewer said, "Come on, let's go and meet everybody." So going up and down this flight of stairs, meeting the senior partner, the secretaries, and this was the first proper job interview I've ever been on. And we just got on famously. And I was there for quite a few years, working my way up. But I think the thing that they saw in me was that I would be a grafter and I would work hard. And I did. And that's where my obsession transferred from the theatre to not necessarily law, but to office life.
How old was you that when you went into legal for the first time then?
17 years old.
So, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Tell me if you think that I'm wrong, but I'm guessing being in that kind of theatre environment where people are somewhat, a lot of the time extroverts, they're very sociable. I'm guessing as a young person, you learn a multitude of kind of transferable skills in communication and this, that, and the other, and all those kind of skills associated with being in that environment. I'm guessing that that must have been somewhat how you develop those skills to get along with people, any kind of person, which stood you in good stead for the law firm.
I don't know. I mean, I really couldn't say. If I'm honest, I think with my personality, I'm a fairly good listener. I love watching. I love observing. I love to what I sometimes call, certainly when I go to, I probably shouldn't say this, but when I go to networking events, I love to throw the grenade and stand back and see the reaction. I like to just observe people, and certainly, I mean, not necessarily a law firm, but anywhere where you have to mix with colleagues and you have to deal with clients and other professionals. It is very, very interesting to just watch and listen other people. I've always found that fascinating with life. That's probably why I like watching programs like Question Time. It's just to watch the conversation and how people, certainly colleagues, interact with other colleagues. So now in my current firm, which I've always done in all my firms, but certainly in particular with my current firm, I like watching colleagues interact with other colleagues. It's very, very interesting.
It sounds to me like you've got kind of a passion for emotional intelligence, listening to people, being able to kind of read the psychology of situations, and that was something that's always kind of appealed to you.
Yeah, yeah. I've sort of always. I think this is again something I probably got from my mother, who used to work in charity shops, and she just enjoyed being around people. And I think with me, certainly when I go to networking events, you put me in a room with 1,000 strangers, I'll go and chat to everybody. And I guess that's possibly a little bit of the old theatrical background coming out, sort of being on stage and.
Maybe you're underestimating just what the theatre, gave you at that young age. And I think maybe
Yeah.
sometimes it's only when you step back you kind of think, actually, where have I got those attributes from?
But it's very interesting now at this stage of life being the employer rather than the employee. And you must, and certainly in your career, you'll get to experience this a billion times more than I will. Candidates going to firms and not really knowing how they will get on with the employer, because everyone has a different personality, and some people could be a lot more confident, sometimes too confident than others, and a lot of people could be very shy, incredibly nervous. And so what I always try to do whenever I'm interviewing anybody is just to have a conversation. I just want to try and see what the people are going to be like, not necessarily under pressure, but with me. Am I going to get on with them? Are we going to work well together? And because everybody is very different. And some people who might be the shyest, most nervous of people could actually be the best type of person for the job. So I think if we're all able to adapt a little bit and give people patience and your time, and then they will, I hope, flourish. Maybe that's too simplistic a philosophy, but it seems to have worked well for me.
No, I actually totally agree with you. I think interviewing, and we'll kind of come on to you and kind of how you identify certain skill sets in a bit, but I think interviewing is an art form. A lot of people aren't very good in it, and to bring the best out in someone, my belief is the interviewer has to do that. That's the interviewer that creates that environment for someone to bring themselves to someone to showcase just how good they are. And I think a lot of the problem when I don't think lawyers are necessarily, and I know I'm generalizing here, I don't think they're always great interviewers at bringing out those soft skills, because it is the interviewer that leads the interview. And it's an art form in itself. And a lot of people interview who have never had interview training. And, without going off on a tangent here, it's about open questions. It's about allowing someone to demonstrate what they do. And, a lot of people naturally ask closed questions. Do you work hard? Well, of course, someone's going to say yes. But if you was to say to someone, tell me about your attitude to work, that's giving them the platform to then talk. So tell me about how you've gone from being this administrator to opening up a law firm. What was that journey like to you?
How long have you got? That's a very short question that requires a 7-hour
It,
answer.
it, it probably
Okay.
does, and everyone we've had people on this podcast whose answers are, they could be 5 hours. But walk us along that journey in
Okay.
quick time. We want to feel what it was like for you.
It's been stages. I mean, let me be absolutely honest that when I was that 17-year-old child at the law firm, first ever job, I never thought ever that I'd one day be the owner of a law
Mm.
firm. I mean, if you'd have said to me back then, one day, Stuart, you'll own a law firm in the city of London, I'd have said, you'll start raving mad. Then if you'd have said to me 2 years ago, I'd still say you're mad. But what I've always done is, and this is something I say to a lot of people, certainly in an interview, if I think that they're not necessarily the right person, but what I say to people is that whatever it is that you do it well. And more importantly than that, do it because you want to do it. Do it well and do it because you want to do it. And this is a philosophy that I've always lived by, that when I was that little kid working on reception, I would get in before the senior partner. I'd get into the office at 7 a.m., sometimes 6:30. I'd be the last one there. Why? Why should I need to stay there that late? Because I just wanted to do the very, very best, and I wanted to put in the effort. So then after a year, I got promotion.
Mm.
I got a promotion out of reception.
Was it because you were wanting to prove yourself, or
No, no,
was it you were
no,
wanting to prove yourself to others, or prove
no,
yourself to yourself, or?
no, none of that. No, never have really had that wanting to prove anything. What it's all boiled
Mm.
down to a desire to do the very best that I can. I couldn't be academic. I couldn't be a grade A student, but what I could do was that which I wanted to do. I did well. So then, when I got the opportunity to become the junior secretary to one of the partners, I was amazing. I mean, I was a fast typist. I got in before that partner arrived. I'd stay late. I'd sometimes come at the weekend to catch up on work. I would never ask for overtime, and that's kind of where I just put in the effort because I wanted to do it well. And then I got promoted to senior secretary, and then soon after that, my then boss said to me, "Stuart, study the law." And I said, "You're crazy. You're ridiculous. I can't be a lawyer." He said, Stuart, study the law. And I did. And we found a route, which was to do distance learning. And it took quite a few years and with a few gaps. And then eventually I became a licensed conveyancer. But I didn't stop there. So even when I was a very, very junior trainee licensed conveyancer, I just put in the effort. I put in the hours because I wanted to do well. And then I found myself getting introducers. I mean, I was getting introducers of work when I was a trainee, and I've still got some of those from way back then. So even now, today, now it's not just wanting to do well, but I want other people to do well. And
Mm.
I have to give back, which the bosses that I've had over the years, some of them have been extremely important, and which I'm sure we'll come on to. But having a good boss is actually as important as having a bad boss. Sometimes, and we'll probably
Mm.
again come onto this, bad bosses can be probably more important than a good boss.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I always say to people that I think there's a big difference between having a manager, no, who wants to really be managed, but or what I say to people is there's a difference between a manager and a leader, and there's a difference between training and mentoring.
Yes.
There's a big difference between the two. It does sound to me, Stuart, that throughout your career, it's been your ability to connect with people, even at a junior level of PQE, and experience that you were building up those relationships, whether it be internally, whether it being externally with work kind of referrers. That's really been a fundamental of kind of what's got you along in your career. It's what's got you into the law firm. It's what's got you clients. It's that ability to connect with people,
I don't know.
which is kind of
I don't know. I think you're being kind. I wouldn't use the word ability.
mm,
I would just use the
mm,
word personality, just where I've grown in confidence. And I would
mm.
sometimes be invited to the senior partner's home for Sunday lunch. I just formed relationships and bonds with everybody that I worked for because that was important to me. Not necessarily because I wanted them to like me, because I just wanted to. It's not really been an effort.
I think that's like a talent, though, Stuart, because you're saying it's not an ability, but there's lots of people who don't have the ability to be able to connect with everyone and kind of
But it
find
can be
that
taught.
common ground with people.
It can be
Mm,
taught that a lot of people's fear of confidence can be nerves, and it's usually the nerves that hold them back. But there are certain tricks that I give people. Probably like the magician in you. There's certain tricks you can show you can show people the tricks of the trade. They're there, I think, to be shared. I'm sure the magic circle wouldn't agree, but
No, tell us a bit about these, and I wouldn't even call them tricks. I would call them kind of skills that you've got in your toolkit that you've picked up along the way for being able to connect and to be able to kind of build rapport with people. I talk to people in my business about various skills like mirroring, the art to kind of build on a relationship. But tell us a bit more about those skills and what they look like to you.
can I just answer the question with the question? What exactly is mirroring?
Mirroring is the art to build rapport with someone, and it's the art of being able to identify someone's personality or someone's. Let me give you a live example. Right.
Okay.
Someone's telling me about themselves, and they tell me about themselves, why they want to leave a role, what their motivations are, what their aspirations are, what they're unhappy about. And then what I do at the end of that conversation or that point of dialogue is I will repeat back to them what they've said to me. So I'll say,
Oh,
"What's important to you, Mr. Candidate, is X, Y, and Z. This is what your motivation is." And the candidate will say to me, "Jason, absolutely, you understand me." The art of mirroring is,
feedback.
showing someone that you connect with them on a deeper
Okay.
level. And it's a very powerful art. But,
Hmm.
tell me about your skills, Stuart.
I think it's just that I like people, and even people that can be a challenge, I find fascinating. So I always look forward to interviews because it's a bit of it's the anticipation. Who am I going to meet? What are they going to be like? Exactly the same when I get a brand new client. Who are you? What do you do? What are you buying? What kind of relationship are we going to have? When I go to a networking event, somebody I might have seen 100 times or somebody brand new. It's just those social professional interactions. That's possibly where I think I'm quite good. I'm able to enter other people's worlds quite easily, and it's just an interest I have, and I think with my particular area of law lends itself well to my personality, and that's possibly why I get, through no fault of anybody's, people,
Mm,
candidates into my area of law where their personality doesn't suit that area of law, and it's not their fault. And when I've had to, unfortunately, let some team members go over the years, and I say to them, it's not your fault, it's the work's fault. Because certainly my area of law, you have to be, it's what I always call soft, cuddly, fluffy, because you're dealing with people that are buying property sometimes for lottery sums of money, borrowed sums of money mostly. There's an almighty pressure for the client,
yeah.
and there's lots of concepts and terminologies they don't
Mm,
understand. So what they're doing is they're putting all their trust in
yeah.
you. You have to put on the mask, go onto stage and be a performer. You've got to be able to carry them. You've got to get them to believe in you and what you're doing. And where a lot of that goes wrong is not necessarily an absence of knowledge of the law, but it's not being able to relate to the client for whatever reasons. Just to add to that, where I think, I mean, just to, not to blame your own trumpet, I think what I am quite.
Really interesting what you're saying there. I think because I work in recruitment and because I'm an identifier of skill sets, that's what my job is. I
Mm,
identify a skill set. I'm identifying yours, and a lot of the things that what you are doing is you're mirroring, adapting yourself to a situation, a person,
mm.
and that's really important for building relationships. So, kind of moving things on, you now employ 20 staff with your co-director. You've got plans for national growth. Tell me, what do you think makes a good leader, Stuart, of
Oh,
a business?
if you're passionate about what you do, if you enjoy what you do, and it helps if you're good at what you do, that can rub off on other people, and that can motivate others to hopefully aspire to reach the level that I've reached. I'm still I'm still on my journey. I'm still on my ascent, and there's still a lot that I want to achieve. And I think the fun thing is getting people on that journey with you. The one thing I can't stand people that call me the boss or anything. I don't like that at all. I like to be Stuart or my colleague. I think if you're not saying that we're all the same, that there are different levels of hierarchy, but I think if everyone feels that they're part of the team, nobody is above anybody. That's certainly something that I learnt from previous bosses, that I just absolutely adored them and still do. I think that's something that's definitely rubbed off on me, where what you try to do is you don't just bark orders at people, but what you try to do is you try to persuade them to do that which you're asking them to do. Sometimes they might disagree with you.
Yeah.
But I like that a lot as well. So, well, why do you disagree with me? Tell me. And they go, oh, okay, I see you've got a point there. They're
Mm,
clearly exercising their brain. But I think if you say it's got to be my way or the highway, then are those
mm,
really the kind of people that you want
it's
to
quite
work?
dictator-like,
It is
isn't
a bit,
it?
oh,
You,
and I've worked for plenty of people like that, and that's been probably where I said earlier, the bad bosses have been most influential on me, because I said if I ever got into a position of authority, I will remember those people vividly and not be like them, and that's been a great
mm,
lesson. Don't be as bad as they were, because they did not inspire. They don't get the best out of you. But I'm afraid, and this is something you're doing, I'm sure you encounter a lot of
mm.
people in power or authority or responsibility, they're not trained how to be managers. They just think, oh, I'm so clever, I'm a lawyer, I'm wonderful, I've passed all the exams, and I've now got this law firm, do as I say. But they're not taught the soft people skills. I wish some of them were, but that's just life, isn't it?
It is, and I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think that you need to keep the dressing room on side, and I think that if you're going to be a business that kind of says this is what you must do, this is how you've got to do it, with no explanation as to the logic of why someone's got to do it, then you're not going to bring the best out in that person. Period. You need to. The best way to get the best out of people is for them to be motivated and want to
Yes,
do it. If you're just
yes.
gonna hit them with the figures stick and hit them with numerous KPIs. That's yes, you might get results from that, but you're not bringing. I believe you're not bringing the best out in that person. What advice would you give to someone, Stuart, who perhaps wants? We get a lot of people who listen to this podcast who want to go into legal. Legal is their passion, but they're not there yet. They're not yet in a law firm. They haven't yet taken that first strides. And obviously, your background in itself was one of you kind of came into legal through a very different path. It wasn't one of the
Unorthodox, I
usual
would
route
say.
of going, yeah, unorthodox, yeah. It's but sometimes that's the best way. I think in life is you've got life experience, you've done something else, and you've got something to offer a law firm. So your journey, your story is really interesting. But what advice would you maybe give to people who are currently maybe going through, and it's a difficult time. I think we need to acknowledge that. But what advice would you give to people who maybe want to break into the legal sector? How to get in? What would your advice be now, being someone who's highly successful owning this law firm?
What I think is important is to ask yourself the question, why do I want to go into law? Because when you are in law, you're not really practicing all areas of law. You tend to become a specialist. Unless you're like a GP, you're working a high street and you're dealing with all areas of law. And maybe it's not even law. What do you particularly find interesting in life? You might find
Hmm.
books interesting. You
Yeah.
might find aviation interesting. You might find cars interesting. You might find computers interesting. But you want to do law. Then what you do is you pluck that particular area of life into law. Say, well, I want to be an IP lawyer. I want to be a litigator. I want to be. I don't know. But I think it's important to have a particular interest and then to find that space within law, because probably a lot of people will do a law degree for reasons that they feel it's important to have a law degree. They don't necessarily want to be a lawyer, but those other people that do want to be a lawyer, what type of lawyer do you want to be? And many people will probably just, and I do encounter this a lot. Certainly when I'm hiring paralegals, they will say, well, I just want to get my foot in the door with a law firm. I want to get some experience. I haven't even started my training contract yet. I don't really know which area of law I want to practice yet. For me, that just feels a little bit reactive. That feels a little bit late. Surely,
Hmm.
if you,
To be in interview stage and to be asking those questions at that stage.
yeah, I think because clearly, if you've got a law degree, you're pretty clever. Because I haven't got a law degree, so
Neither have I.
um, I don't know. I think just to find yourself some particular area of law that you're really interested in. But then again, with somebody like me, it just by accident got into conveyancing. It just so happened that I was
Hmm.
working as a secretary to my boss, who was a conveyancer, and then that's just I just got the bug from that, and so now I couldn't even conceive of doing any other area of law. I mean, my brother was a prosecutor, and there's no more I could have done what he has done to what he couldn't have done what I do. Um, so that's just where I'm not sure if that answers the question. What was the question?
Yeah, no. I take from that. The question was, what advice would you give to someone who's maybe a junior in law and wants to kind of break into the sector? And what I'm taking from what you said is ultimately to really give thought to one,
I think
what it
so.
is you want to do. Yeah, take what it is you want to actually do. Think
Yeah.
about it carefully. Then once you've actually kind of come to some level of understanding on what it is you want to do, you want to think about how it is you're going to apply yourself and then kind of push forward. That's what I'm taking from what you kind of said.
No, I think because I think again to not necessarily sometimes it's good to separate the academia from the personality and to say, well, what will lend my personality well to that particular
Mm.
area
Mm.
of employment. And so maybe a brain surgeon wouldn't necessarily want to be a pilot. So I think sometimes it's important to just look at the things that you particularly know you are good at, and certainly many areas of
Mm.
law, you don't need to be engaged with people if it is an academic area of law. So I think it is important to just look at the basics. What are the things that you particularly find interesting? What can you do well, and how can you merge the two things together?
Kind of fleshing out those skills that you might have. What's your talents? What can
Yeah,
you kind of build upon. Okay, our time is nearly at an end. It's been
Oh,
so insightful. It's been interesting. However, one last bit of advice I'd ask you for is, we've got people out there who listen to this show who are entrepreneurial. They want to start a business. What would be the one key bit of business advice you would give to someone who's maybe considering starting up their own business?
to really be an expert in that which you are opening up. So I wouldn't say, if you're not yet, then to do a lot of research. So when we set up our firm, there's a lot of things that we had to learn very, very quickly. And very importantly, to have modest expectations. Don't go in with grand plans to be a millionaire within day one. It doesn't work like that. You have to,
Mm,
if you can have very, very modest aspirations, and that's what we did with our business plan.
Yeah.
Very modest aspirations. Then it makes it easier to meet those targets, and then you feel a sense of satisfaction, and then you can go on to the next level and the next level. Don't start with the bar so high. Set yourself a very low
mm.
bar, because then it makes it far easier to jump over.
Okay.
That's what I would say.
And I think what I take from that is, if you're going to start a business, make sure you've done your due diligence.
Yes.
You understand, the area you want to kind of be in. You've researched it properly. You understand it, and make sure that, I think, in one way to articulate it, make sure you're driving a car with a steering wheel, so you've got some kind of level of direction. Stuart, thank you so much for joining me on this episode. It's been interesting. It's been insightful. It's been great to hear your story.
Bless you. Thank you. I enjoyed it.
If you want to find out more about Stuart Kaye, you can go to his company website, which is adamskaye, spelled Kaye.com. That was Stuart Kaye. I'm Jason Connolly. This is the Career Success Podcast. Until next time, goodbye.